on the field.
He runs up the field and gets out of bounds, but that is not a first down pickup. And
we got reaction.
We got flags.
Mason.
And the Steelers, we got a kick in the end zone by a Steeler. And I got a kick out.
He hit him with it. He tried to hit him with the helmet. And tried to hit Mason with the helmet.
Well, this just sets the stage for
the rematch. Yeah, it does.
In the end zone to our left, but a lot of markers on the field, and it's going to take time to get this sorted out with 8 seconds left of the football game.
Sets the stage for a hell of a lot more than that, I can tell you that much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do, usually every weekday from from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 to noon Pacific. Check your local listings nearest you, 250-plus markets across the United States of America. Check our AM/FM listing, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM Channel 80, plus ESPN Radio simulcast over the live national television airwaves of ESPN News. Number to call up, as always, is 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, celebrating 7 years and over 700 cars donated to veterans. Learn more at keystoprogress.com. It's a lot of stuff to get into. We all know what happened last night. Carmelo Anthony, back in the National Basketball Association as a member of the Portland Trailblazers, will have to take a back seat. Paul George's return to the Clippers lineup, dropping 33 points in his Clippers debut, that will have to take a back seat. The games itself, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens against Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans this weekend. The Dallas Cowboys going up against the Detroit Lions. That will have to take a back seat because of what transpired in Cleveland, Ohio last night. With the Cleveland Browns beating up on the Pittsburgh Steelers 21-7. 2-game winning streak after a 4-game losing streak, improving their record to 4-6. Steelers, after winning 5 of their last 6 games, have now fallen to 5-5 on the season. None of that really matters right now. What really matters right now is what we saw transpire with 8 seconds left in regulation of the Cleveland Browns' victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers last night. The Pittsburgh Steelers getting ramrodded, obviously suffering through a bevy of injuries. No Le'Veon Bell anymore, no Antonio Brown anymore. Instead, James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster were there, but James Conner re-injured his shoulder. Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe, went out with a concussion. Another one of the Steelers receivers, I forgot who it was, one of the defenders for the Cleveland Browns, launched right into his head, helmet for helmet. He gets ejected from the game. The Steelers receivers taken out for the remainder of the game. It was injuries and hits going on all over the place. And Myles Garrett, one of the premier pass rushers in the game of football in the National Football League, was all over the backup that is Mason Rudolph all night long, making him look every bit like the backup he is. Nevertheless, with 8 seconds left, Myles Garrett rushes after Mason Rudolph, the game clearly in hand and having been decided, and gets him and takes him down. Mason Rudolph obviously had a problem with that. You could see him trying to grab at Myles Garrett's helmet and take it off. He was not successful in that regard. Myles Garrett, who is on top of him at this particular moment in time, instead grabs his face mask while Mason Rudolph is on the ground, yanks the helmet off of him. 2 offensive linemen, mainly for DeCastro, is holding Myles Garrett back while Mason Rudolph is charging at him. No helmet at all. No helmet on. And Myles Garrett proceeds to swing violently with Mason Rudolph's helmet in his right hand, throws an overhand with the helmet, and connects with Mason Rudolph's head. It wasn't the crown of the helmet. Mason Rudolph wasn't knocked unconscious. Instead, he was pushed in the back by Larry Ogunjobi. Ogunjobi received a 1-game suspension for his actions, shoving Mason Rudolph in the back thereafter. But nevertheless, it is what it is. So the NFL, predictably so, came down with a heavy hand, suspending Myles Garrett indefinitely, at minimum, for the rest of the season and these playoffs in the event that the Cleveland Browns are able to make the playoffs. Myles Garrett, if you look at his on-field incidents right there on television on ESPN News, it shows he's been flagged 5 times in his career for roughing the passer or unnecessary roughness entering Thursday night's game. He's been fined $42,000 for the roughing the passer in week number 2, a game in which he broke the leg of Trevor Siemian. We can't forget that. He's also been fined $10,500 for punching Delanie Walker in week 1. So you got a week 1 fine. You got a week 2 fine. Overall, flagged 5 times in his career, and then you have last night. Here's the bottom line. The suspension, ladies and gentlemen, is justified. I don't see how anybody can argue that it's not. The suspension is justified. Myles Garrett should have been suspended for the rest of the season. As I said on the airwaves on ESPN's First Take, which airs on ESPN every weekday morning from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time, 7 to 9 a.m. Pacific, I thought Max Kellerman's argument was absolutely asinine. And anybody who emulates or echoes that kind of sentiments, asinine. Mason Rudolph should be the focus. He's the provocateur. Stop it. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying it doesn't matter. Mason Rudolph is not the one who snatched the helmet off of somebody else and then hit him in the head with it. That's not Mason Rudolph. That was Myles Garrett. Mason Rudolph might be 6'3" or whatever it is, 235 pounds. Myles Garrett is 270. He's a defensive lineman and a locomotive and one of the elite pass rushers in this game of football, shoving aside 300-pound men on a weekly basis to get at quarterbacks that decided to throw a quarterback to the ground with 8 seconds left, and then after doing so, rip his helmet off his head and then hit him with it. With a haymaker-type swing at that. There is no justification for it. I wish I could justify it. It cannot be justified. It cannot be justified. There's nothing to say. You can talk about the heat of action, the combat, the heat of battle. Your impulse, you blacked out. Okay. But that doesn't absolve you. It doesn't let you off the hook. It doesn't absolve you from the suspension that you ultimately incurred. You cannot do what he did, period. I'm not here to character assassinate Myles Garrett. I'm not here to tell you, oh, he's some bad dude. He's a despicable human being, and I'm not here to do that. That's not how I feel about him. I've met him a couple of times. Seems like a really good guy. I'm willing to even buy the fact that he just lost it in a moment. You can't do what he did and not be suspended for this guy and not receive this kind of suspension. You can't do it. Not in today's NFL. Maybe when Terry Bradshaw was playing. Maybe when Roger Staubach was playing. Maybe when Mike Ditka was playing. Maybe when Dick Butkus was playing. Maybe when Jack Lambert and Jack Ham was playing. Hell, maybe even when Lawrence Taylor was playing. And Michael Singletary. Or Ronnie Lott. Maybe then. Even that might have been a finable offense. But in today's NFL, you got to know better. Myles Garrett didn't know better. And as a result of that, you got to pay the price. And I'm going to tell you why it's indefinite. Because it's going to be more than 6 games. That's why. Immediately when this happened, I said last night on Twitter, end of the season for him. Suspension, instantly. Now, I might have overreacted by saying Pouncey didn't deserve a penalty at all because he got suspended for 3 games because ultimately when he saw his quarterback get knocked upside the head with the helmet, he immediately started throwing punches, and once Myles Garrett was on the ground, started kicking him in the head. He kicked him in the head 1 time. So I'll be the first to admit to you that absolutely positively, in hindsight and retrospect, I think he warrants a suspension. I personally think he should not have received more than 1 game. Because to see your quarterback have that happen to him, I don't blame Pouncey for reacting the way that he did 1 bit. You don't do something like that. You just don't. And he blacked out. I'll also make this plain. If that were Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, would Myles Garrett have done that? Now, in fairness, to be totally fair to Max Kellerman, guess what? They wouldn't have done what Mason Rudolph did in terms of running after Myles Garrett like that. Fair enough. But do you really, really think that Myles Garrett would have swung at one of them like that? I don't think it would have happened. Not one bit. There's going to be a lot of people that feel that Myles Garrett deserved this suspension, and I'm one of them. And I don't mind the indefinite suspension because I know exactly what the league is doing. The league is saying, yo, we're going to suspend you for the rest of the season. But what we're not going to allow to happen is we fade into the offseason. All of this is forgotten, and then you just come back with a fresh slate next season. No, the league is going to want to send a message, and is going to want to use this as an impediment or as dissuasive measures to ensure that this kind of action isn't duplicated by anybody else again. So they're going to stretch this in the next season. That's why the indefinite tag comes with it. I believe he's suspended for the rest of this year, the final 6 games, because I don't believe Cleveland's making the playoffs. And then after that, it wouldn't surprise me if Roger Goodell added 2 to 4 games to it. Marcus Spears, our very own Marcus Spears, believes it should have been 16 games. 6 this season and the first 10 games next season. Jonathan Vilma, who used to be on New Orleans with Bountygate and all of that stuff, he believes it should be the 6 games and then the first 4 games of next season, totaling 10 games. Guys like Damian Woody and others believe there should be assault charges. I'm not going there. I think that is a bit ridiculous and excessive. I must say that. I would tell you that my personal belief is that the NFL should handle this matter. According to our reports, the police in Cleveland, Ohio, are not investigating this because there has been no formal complaint filed. According to the agent of Mason Rudolph, I believe his name is Tim Young, he said all options are presently on the table. Mason Rudolph and him are exploring their options, meaning that legal action may or may not be pursued. They haven't decided yet. Fines are coming because like exists in the NBA where you cannot come off the bench because it warrants a suspension. In the National Football League, it warrants a fine. So numerous people ran off the sidelines and they will all receive fines from the National Football League. That much we know. We also know that Ogunjobi received a 1-game suspension, that Marquise Pouncey received a 3-game suspension for throwing the blows and kicking his opponent. Both the Steelers and the Browns organizations have been fined $250,000 apiece. And Myles Garrett, one of the premier pass rushers in the game of football, the former number 1 overall pick of the Cleveland Browns, is officially suspended indefinitely. The suspension, obviously, John Runyon handles such disciplinary measures. Troy Vincent writes up the suspension. He answers to John Runyon, which means that this is Troy Vincent. The appeals, if there is one, will be heard by Derek Brooks, along with James Thrash. And I'm telling you right now, don't mean a damn thing. Myles Garrett ain't coming back this season. The season is over. And he's going to miss some games next season, too, if I had to predict. And oh, by the way, let me be the first to say, it's justified. I don't want him to miss the whole of next season. He doesn't deserve to be arrested. People need to stop that. This happened on a football field. It was in the heat of battle. Okay? This is not premeditated. Okay? An intent to commit a crime. I think people are being a bit excessive for that. I think my buddy, Booger McFarland, the voice of Monday Night Football, is going on Get Up this morning and stating emphatically that if he were a member of the Steelers organization, he would not leave Cleveland until charges were filed against Myles Garrett. I think that's utterly ridiculous. I really, really do. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, it happened on the football field in the heat of battle. And let me read so I make sure I quote Booger McFarland accurately. Myles Garrett violated code amongst the fraternity. We compete against one another until the edge of destruction within the rules. Afterwards, we take our helmets off, shake hands, and wish each other well. We never intentionally try to hurt each other. He committed a crime and should be charged. I think Booger McFarland is too damn excessive. Period. I like it. I appreciate his passion. His knowledge about football is not to be questioned. And I think he's doing a great job on Monday Night Football. With this particular situation, with what he was quoted on, Twitter is saying what he went on Get Up and said, I think is utterly ridiculous. Damian Woody alluding to it last night. Assault. I think it's utterly ridiculous. It's going too far. Now, you could sit up there and you could say, hey, guess what? What if this had happened to Mason Rudolph? I get that. You know what my response is? One have nothing to do with the other. I'm just using this to be analogous to the discussion at hand. Ladies and gentlemen, there are murder charges that exist in this world, right, JC? There's also murder 1, murder 2. There's manslaughter. There's attempted murder. There's assault. You know why those charges differentiate from one another? Because what actually happened is taken into consideration. I could attempt to murder you. But if I did not succeed, it ain't murder. That's just the reality of the world that we're living in. Since people want to bring in law enforcement into the equation, what could have happened to Mason Rudolph did not happen. So by virtue of the fact that it did not happen, you can then take that into consideration to measure the level of involvement, if at all, if anything at all, that law enforcement should have in this equation. Now, if Mason Rudolph got hit with the crown of the helmet and blood was gushing out of his head and he was knocked unconscious on the football field and they had to rush on paramedics and rush him into an ambulance, you might have had to take Myles Garrett off the field in cuffs. Under those circumstances, sure. But the fact that that did not happen, it's perfectly within your right to take that into consideration and to say, you know what? We don't need to go that far with him. The NFL can handle this. The NFL did handle this. He is suspended for the rest of the year. And oh, by the way, it might be more. That makes complete and total sense. And because that makes complete and total sense, you have what you have. Now, let me say this. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to hear me, and I want you to hear me good. We live in a very, very unfair world sometimes, particularly as it pertains to how people are perceived and how differently that may be according to one's gender, ethnicity, and beyond. We know this. If you think for 1 second that a Troy Vincent, executive VP for the National Football League, that a James Thrash or a Derek Brooks, appeals officers for the National Football League, who would hear this case, because there is a process that Myles Garrett will be granted. If you think for 1 second that their own ethnicity doesn't come into question, I don't give a damn what they say, it does. Now, you might say, oh, Stephen A., what are you talking about? Why are you going there? I'll tell you why I'm going there. Black men are judged differently. They're mindful of it in a league that's over 70% black. That does not mean that the NFL would hand down a different punishment for someone white, because they wouldn't. It would be the same no matter what. But I'm saying to you, the level of disgust is exponentially elevated when it comes to us because we understand how we're going to be judged. And we understand that when a Richie Incognito acts up, America says, what's wrong with him? When a black man like Myles Garrett acts up, America tends to say, what's wrong with them? It ain't just him. It's a whole lot of people. Case in point for proof. Last night, during the press conference, in the immediate aftermath of the game with Freddie Kitchens, somebody asked Freddie Kitchens, has Myles Garrett received any anger management sessions, courses, classes? I forget the word they used, but they used anger management. I've seen plenty of white individuals lose their cool. I don't hear those questions asked during press conferences. It took about 5 or 6 different incidences from Richie Incognito for us to get to that point. We had to find out about him bullying a 320-pound man before we want to ask him about anger management. Richie Incognito been doing crazy, dirty stuff for a long, long time before that. Nobody said nothing. Nobody said anything. Let me be grammatically correct. I'm not saying anything is about race as it pertains to white America. What I am saying is that as a young black man, you must understand that you're going to be judged differently, more harshly, and your actions are going to have a residual impact that far extends beyond you. As unfair as that may be. And because of that, the elevated level of responsibility kicks in. And the word professionalism is more profound, more illuminated, more paramount. Because we're held accountable on that level. And it's just the way that it is. If Myles Garrett didn't know, he knows now. And everybody needs to take heed. And by that, I do mean everybody, but especially the African-American athlete out there. Just a thought. Just a thought. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. That was Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. Get back to your calls and more in a minute. Plus, I got a couple of guests that I'm going to bring on the show with us. I'll let you know about that after the break. Stick around. You're listening live to Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. By the way, today is the day for doing with The Home Depot's wide selection of fall lawn care products. No matter where you live, The Home Depot has all the supplies you need and the tools like mulch calculators to make sure you get the most from your fall lawn or gardening projects. Prepare your grass for winter with a variety of products from Scotts and the help of The Home Depot's convenient pickup lockers. You'll find plenty of DIY projects, ideas, and buying guides that make outdoor activities fun and easy. So visit homedepot.com/outdoors for details. That's The Home Depot. More saving, more doing.
What if there was one place you could go to hear the most essential story every day?
Adam Silver was
Mr. Brown was amazing.
That's ESPN Daily. You'll hear the story